Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I want to start a new reading vlog, and it's not like I'm currently filming 3 reading vlogs already. I don't know, November is cursed, but I want to start my reading vlog for the Diviner series. So this probably be another long one, just because we have 4 books to read and talk about. I don't really know anything about this series, apart from that I think it is set in a 90s, 20s New York, and there's some kind of magic, I think some kind of like psychics or mediums or stuff like that, something going on with ghosts, but having these powers is forbidden. And I think we're following a main character who has powers. But I'm not even sure if that's correct, so we'll definitely see. I'm very excited to finally read this series. I have read one book by Libba Bray before, her book about the beauty queens on the island. What is that called? I don't remember, but I really enjoyed that one. The audiobook was amazing because it was read by Libba Bray herself, and I think she did a really great job with that one. So I always wanted to read more, and I always wanted to read The Diviners because it sounds like it's right up my alley, like a little bit spooky fantasy with a trendy setting. Like that's me. So I hope I will love this. I have heard that the first 2 books are quite good and then it goes a bit downhill. So I'm intrigued to see how I feel about that. But yeah, I'm gonna start it today or tomorrow, and I will update you always at the halfway point and when I finish the book, so this doesn't get completely out of hand. And yeah, we'll see. I'm so intrigued. I'm so excited. This is also the 5th of the series that I wanted to read this year, so this is the last one. I've already read the Greenbone Saga, the Poppywood trilogy, the Broken Earth trilogy, and the Devabad trilogy. So for all 4 of these, I have vlogs as well, if you're interested in one of those. But now, let's get into the Diviners. So I am 50% through the Diviners now, and I thought I'd give you a quick update. Now, so far I am enjoying my experience. I think that this book is definitely different than I thought it would be, but I also didn't have like quite the idea of what this book would actually be like. Obviously, I knew it would be set on the 1920s in New York, but apart from that, I didn't really have a good idea how it would feel, you know, what the storyline would be and all that. So I am definitely starting to enjoy it more now that I know what to expect and where it's kind of going. I think that I also didn't expect it to be or to have so many different characters. So that's something that I find very intriguing, and I'm very much intrigued to see how that progresses, because we are following mainly a couple of characters, but then there's also side characters that seem to be quite important as well. And this is all, you know, set in this like world where there's people with special abilities, but they're hidden. And we don't really know why they exist, but we know that they're called the Diviners. And we're basically mainly following one girl who just moved from Ohio to New York to live with her uncle and enjoy the high society life. So I think her name is Evie, and I really think that she's like this like typical 1920s character. She's very easygoing, carefree, but then she has this like ability to touch things and then remember what the things remember, basically. So we have her, but then we also have Memphis, who is a black character, and he's taking care of his smaller brother while his father has moved away. They're living with their aunt, and they both have abilities. Now, Memphis had healing abilities, but something happened to them. We don't really quite know what yet. And the little brother seems to be psychic, so he seems to be able to see things and to kind of channel things. So he's almost like, what do you call that? Like, not a medium, but someone who doesn't necessarily see in the future, but maybe a little bit. So that's kind of where that's going. But then we also learn about these side characters that also have magical abilities. Like, one of the side characters is gay and he can walk through dreams, basically. So he can be in other people's dreams and stuff like that. And he seems to be looking for someone. And then we have his best friend, basically, and she also has abilities that we don't know much about yet. So there is quite a big group of characters that seem to be affected by this. Plot-wise, we're dealing with a murder case, and as a reader, you already know what's going on. So I think that's always interesting. So we know who the perpetrator is, but it is quite mysterious. Like, we know how he got to be in New York, but we don't really know his backstory, or we start putting it together, but the characters kind of investigating this murder, they are still pretty much in the dark about this. So this can be a good and a bad thing depending on how the mystery is built, but for now I think it works quite well just because we have that paranormal element. And I think if we wouldn't know already who the perpetrator is, this might be something that puts people off in the end because it seems like a cop-out. But the way we have it here, I think it does work. The characters do read a little bit younger than I thought they would, but I haven't read like older YA books in a while, so I think that's definitely why. And now that I'm halfway through, I definitely feel like it is picking up now. So where I stopped reading, we just had this very big chapter where they're in a speakeasy and then it gets raided by the police, and I think for the first time have most of these characters I just talked about all together and meeting each other. So I think this is something that will set more things off now. Yeah, I'm just really intrigued to learn about the lore behind it all, because I think that's mainly where this is going. Like, who are the diviners? Why do they exist? And what's going on with that guy who is murdering people in quite a gruesome way. So yeah, I'm really enjoying it so far. I don't think that there's any spoilery things I have to share just now, because yeah, the beginning was a little bit slow, I guess, just building up the characters a little bit so we can get to know them, we can get to know the scene, and yeah, we also get these chapters from the point of view of the victims of the murders, so that is interesting to say the least. I don't know if I really need those. I think it's okay to have them, and they usually stop right before the people get murdered, so it is definitely still something that a younger audience can read. But so we get a little bit more of the background, and I think that's mainly where the spookiness of the book comes from. Something else I am intrigued to see how it works out is the kind of love romance stuff that's happening. So basically with our main character Evie, she has a best friend, and the best friend is in love with a guy who's working for Evie's uncle. But it seems like that guy has actually a crush on Evie herself. And then we also have Sam, who is a pickpocket. He also has magical abilities. He can basically make people not see him, which is a very good quality when you're a pickpocket. And he has a plan to make Evie fall in love with him. So I think that will probably not work out, but we'll see. But yeah, we're heading into some messy business, and that's what I'm here for. I always like when relationships get a little bit messy, so I think I will be entertained for the second half of the book as well. And I'll definitely update you when I finish the book. So it's time for another update because I just finished The Diviners and I wanted to let you know how it went. I must say that I didn't love it completely, but I also didn't quite expect that when I started it. I mean, it was written 10 years ago, and with these YA novels, sometimes they don't age that well. But I didn't have many problems with that. I think that probably some characterizations and stuff would have been done a little bit different, but I still felt it held up quite well. For the second half of the book in general, I thought it was quite interesting. Like, the point where I stopped was the point where all of the characters kind of came together in one scene. And I thought that would be the kind of jumping off point where their path would come together more. But it actually wasn't, and that was an interesting choice because we can obviously see that all of them play a role. But for now, their journeys are still very, very different. And I'm intrigued to see how that continues in the second book, because I actually had some different expectations for that. They are still wrapped up in this whole mess together, but just everyone's dealing with it on their own for now. So that was something I did not expect. So overall, in the end, we definitely have Evie solving most of that problem. It's clear that she stays the main character, even though we get some different perspectives. But I felt like in the second half, her point of view was definitely, again, the most important one and the most focused on one. So I think that some of the other characters are actually a little bit more interesting, but I don't mind it. I think Evie is still fine as a main character. That was kind of surprising to see that after this halfway point, all of their paths kind of diverged again. And we'll see where that goes in the future of this series. Now, what I must say is that I think that Memphis storyline is a little bit like, I feel like he got all the crap and I don't really love that. We'll see how that evolves in the next one, but I just felt a little bit bad for his character because, like, spoilers and stuff. But yeah, I just wanted this to be a little bit more balanced. I think one of the characters I definitely want to see more of is Theta. Is that how you say it? I'm never quite sure how Americans pronounce these Greek alphabet things. But we do get a little bit of her backstory, and I absolutely adored that. And I definitely want to see more of her. I think that she is so interesting, and there are a couple of things hinted at the end that might happen with her. So I'm intrigued to see that. What I also found very interesting about this last book, this second half of the book, is that we have this whole big scene at the end, you know, the big thing that everything led to. It happens, and then the book still goes on for quite a long time. And I gotta be honest, if I hadn't planned on reading the second book immediately after, I would have been so confused because everything that happens after that is such a clear setup for the rest of the series that I felt that it was just a bit clunky, you know? I think it would have been better to just drop a couple of hints and then make this part the start of the next book. But I also have a feeling, I'm not quite sure about that, but I'll tell you when I've read more, that there will be a bit of a time jump to the next book. So maybe that's why. But it just felt a little bit cheap. Like, if I had read this when the book came out and there wasn't a sequel already, I would have been so confused why there's so much ending. And you're just turning the pages and you're like, this must be the end. And then there's always another chapter. It's so weird. So I don't know why Libba Bray decided to do it that way, but I definitely wouldn't have done that. Apart from that, I had fun with it. I decided to give it 4 stars. It's not like the strongest 4 stars, but I also have to keep in mind that I read this book over a very long stretch of time, like for almost a month, just because I was so busy, and that usually hinders my enjoyment. I very much enjoy just going in and plowing through books, and so whenever you get ripped out of the story again and again. You can never quite grasp it the same way. So I think 4 stars is an accurate rating. I think if I had the time and just read it very quickly, it would be a more solid 4 stars than it feels like right now. It is easy to read, it is fun, and I can recommend it. I think the thing that surprised me about this, and I think that is true for the whole series, I'm not quite sure, it is much more of a murder mystery than people made it out to be. The fantasy elements and the horror elements are very small, and I would say it's mainly a murder mystery. So that was surprising to me. I don't mind that. I do like mysteries, so it's fine. But that was just a surprising thing there that I wanted to mention. This is the second book I've read this year where an abortion takes place or is part of the story, but the book is not about abortion. It's just one normal part of the life of one of the characters. And I appreciate that so much. The first book I read this year that was in the Greenbone saga. I think in the second book, I'm not quite sure right now anymore. And then in this one again, we have a main character who has an abortion, but it's just one part of their story, and it's not really a big part, a big thing. And I love that because it is just a normal part of so many people's lives. So I can really appreciate that when books do that, when they can just incorporate this as like one thing that a person does, and that's it. For the more spoilery bits, I don't really have a lot to say, I think. What I did enjoy a lot was the romantic tension between Evie and then the guy's name I don't know how to pronounce. I would say Jericho, but that is like a German pronunciation, so I have no idea how it would actually be pronounced. But their romantic tension is so good. It builds very slowly. It's like the tiniest little burn, but I was so happy that at the end we do get the kiss, and I did appreciate that. I think it's funny because it reminded me a little bit of Ninth House, where you have them in the house when the male guy, whatever his name is, he is under the influence of that spray thing that came into his face from the house, and he's basically intoxicated. And that reminded me so much of a scene in Ninth House, where you're like, oh my god, this is like actually horrible. Like I would hate it when something like that happens to me. And you have to deal with a guy like that. But I think that Evie handled it really, really well. Yeah, I did really like that little bit of a romance. And I'm very interested to see where it goes, because obviously Evie has some trouble with that because she still thinks that Mabel is interested in him. But at the end we also get a little bit of a glimpse that maybe there's someone else for Mabel in there. So yeah, I'm very intrigued to see how that develops. But I did really enjoy his character, the way he's like this kind of strong and silent guy, and maybe a little bit boring at first glance. That is what Evie thinks, but yeah, I just really enjoyed that little journey there. I'm also intrigued to see what happens with Sam, because yeah, he is kind of a fun character, and I do like that Evie is not falling for it, so I really want to see where that goes. Let's just say that. So the character dynamics are very interesting. Also with Memphis and Theda, I think that it is interesting to put this whole issue of interracial relationships in there. So yeah, it definitely was a different time, and it wasn't just possible for them to be together openly. So I'm interested to see how that is brought up now in the rest of the series. I do think that they do have quite an interesting chemistry, and they're obviously drawn together because they both have these abilities. And yeah, I think we don't really see a lot of Theda's ability, but it has something to do with her getting very hot, I guess. So that's also just intriguing, because like all the other characters have more like mental abilities, like Evie with her reading things, and Sam with making people just not see him, and Memphis with healing, and then Theda is like just getting hot. I don't know. It seems a little bit funny to me. So I hope that we will learn more about her ability. We only get a few glimpses of it for now. I really love the whole backstory of Theda, and I did really enjoy her bond with Henry. I think that we don't see enough of Henry in this book. I definitely hope that we will get more of his character in the next ones. But just the way that they met and became friends, and the 100% trust they have for each other is so beautiful, and I loved reading about that. So that was great. I must say, what really got to me during the end of the book is this whole talk of eugenics and all the religious fanaticism. Obviously, that is the main theme of the book. We have this kind of cult where they believe in the rising of the beast and stuff like that. But it got to a point that was just so much, and it just really dampened my mood. Obviously, because these things have existed, and that is also mentioned in the author's note, and I did really appreciate that. But it's just something that maybe on a Friday night you're not in the mood to read about. But I think it is important, especially for this kind of historical fiction that usually glamorizes a time period, to show the negative aspects as well. And I think we have that with these villain characters, as well as with Theda's backstory, for example, where we see that the role and the possibilities of a woman weren't that great either during that time. So I can appreciate that, but it was also just, it was a lot. It was definitely a lot. And then we learn about that whole thing with the mechanical people. I think that will probably be part of the rest of the series, because we also have Sam looking for his mother, and it sounds like, this whole buffalo thing and all, it all sounds like it was connected. So we have that kind of, I don't want to call it a conspiracy, but basically during the war there were some projects of the American government that were kept secret, and in this little end bit we see that Will was somehow involved in that, and he also lost his fiance, which maybe had something to do with it. And then Sam's mother is missing, and we get the backstory of Jericho, whatever his name is. And I thought that was very interesting, but as I said, it just went a little bit too long in the end. I didn't need all of that to be interested in the next book. It is intriguing, and I do like the kind of steampunk element that this brings to the story. And yeah, we'll just see where it goes, I guess. If Libba Bray can make it work or not. I think that's it for the update. I think I talked enough. I'm very intrigued to go into the second book. From the little description I just read while buying the ebook, I guess that we will have a new set of murders and a new mystery to solve, and I guess along the way we will learn more about this overarching plot as well. And yeah, I'm just very intrigued to see how the characters will come together again in the second book, and whether there will be a time jump or we just set in right after the events of the first book. So let's find out. So I'm now halfway through Lair of Dreams, and I thought I'd let you know what I think. This one has a little bit of a different focus than the first book. The first book followed very much Evie, and in this one we shift. We have two new characters who become very important. We still have all of the other characters, but they're more like the side characters now, I would say. We still get to know what happens to Evie, what she's up to. as I said, the focus is just shifting onto other characters, which I'm very much enjoying. So in this one, we follow mainly Henry and Ling. Now, Henry we already know from the first book. He has been quite an important side character in the first book, and he has quite a nice love story in his past that ended quite badly. So we learn about that, and we learn about his search for that person that he lost. The special ability that this book focuses on is a dream walking, and so we also get Ling as a new character, and we have also seen her in the first book, but we haven't really gotten to know her yet. So I think this book focuses a lot more on her and her backstory. Now, Ling is half Chinese and half Irish. Her mom is from Ireland and her dad is from China, and so this book also focuses a lot on the discrimination that happened during the time, and it talks about the Chinese Exclusion Act a lot and stuff like that. So I think that this is very educational as well. This is something that I have come across in other books before this one, but I always think that having, young adult books that teach you something that maybe you don't know that much about is always great, and it just really helps to kind of make American history a little bit more approachable, I guess, because you see not only the law, but you also see the impact it has on people's lives and what that actually means for everyday life. And I think that is done quite well. Now, obviously, this is not own voices, so I don't know how well the portrayal works. I can't really speak to that, but I think that the educational aspect about showing the impacts of a law like that on people's lives is done well. So I'm really enjoying that. I also really enjoy the whole dream aspect of this book, as you can guess from the title, that this is the focus. And we do get this weird character we already met at the end of the first book, where we don't really know who he is, but we get a couple of hints who he might be. So I'm interested to see how that connects to what's going on as the main plot line. In this one, we're following a mysterious sickness, and it's really interesting because this book was written, or it came out in 2015, so I presume it was written before that. And when you read this book, you will get some flashbacks to the coronavirus, because we're following a mysterious sickness that starts in Chinatown in New York. And so we have a lot of Asian hate that is portrayed in this book, and you can definitely see parallels. And I think it is just so shocking that this book is set 100 years before the coronavirus, but still there is a lot of parallels that you can explore. For example, officials start calling that sickness the Chinese sleeping sickness because it started in Chinatown. But it doesn't really make sense because it can affect anybody. So it's not a Chinese sickness. So the kind of racial framing of sickness and stuff like that really reminded me of what happened in 2020 with the way government worked in the US back then. Also, we have a lot of quarantine talk. People are forced to stay home, businesses are closed. So it's definitely reminiscent of that time. And I think that is also something to keep in mind if you're still uncomfortable with the way things were the last couple of years. I think maybe this book is not the right thing to pick up. But I feel like in Germany we've basically moved on. We don't really quarantine anymore. We don't have to and stuff like that. So I think for me it is fine to read this book, and I find it more interesting to see the parallels there. That's mainly what this book is about. I think it is very interesting that this is a series where it's not a very straightforward one storyline that is told, but every book stands on its own as well. So I think this is also a series you don't have to marathon necessarily, which I always like to do, so that's what I'm gonna do. But I think you could also enjoy this with like longer breaks between the books, because you don't really need a lot of the knowledge that has been in the previous book. But then for our characters, obviously some things have changed, and I don't want to talk about that in a spoiler-free way because I don't know how. So I think I will go into a couple of spoilers now about some things that are happening to the characters that I found surprising, that I like, that I don't like. So if you haven't read this book and you don't want to be spoiled, please skip over this part. I will mark it in the chapters and you'll be safe from spoilers. I'll tell you what I thought about the book at the end. So for the spoilery bit, obviously at the end of the first book, we see that Evie is coming out as a diviner. So in this one, her role is very, very different. She's not talking to her uncle right now, which I hope will change. And we don't really get a lot of Will at all up until this point. We know that he's on kind of a mission with Sister Walker and that they've worked together before, finding diviners. So we don't really know what he's up to right now, but I think that adds an interesting layer of mystery. And Evie now is the sweetheart seer, I think. So she's really famous now. She's doing a radio show where she's reading people's objects, and yeah, she's like really a rising star in New York now because of that. And we also see how some people who are more religious don't really appreciate the rise of the diviners. We see that there's a lot of charlatans as well who just pretend to have special powers to make money from it. And yeah, the environment has changed a lot. Now, most of the other characters are still keeping their secrets. So we especially see that with Theta. She still hasn't really talked about her secret with anyone except for Henry. And we can see how that is starting to be an issue for her now. But that is a very minor storyline right now, so we don't get a lot of Theta and Memphis. We do get some of their like date scenes, but it doesn't feel like they're very important for the overall story at the moment, which is kind of sad. Then we have the whole story with Big Bill and Memphis' little brother, and that's the one that is very creepy to me. Like, I worry a lot about that kid. We don't really know what Bill's deal is. He does seem kind of sinister, but at the same time he has definitely been exploited by the government and then just left to rot. So I do understand kind of where he comes from, but he has some serious issues, and yeah, he's definitely a danger to that small kid, and people give him more and more power over him, and that is, yeah, it's just very worrying, and I'm a little bit afraid where this will go, but we'll see. And then we have the whole fake dating plot with Evie and Sam. And I really don't know how I feel about that, because obviously Sam is the obvious choice for the love interest in this series. He's the charming, cool guy, a little bit mysterious and edgy and stuff like that. And so I really enjoyed that in the first book, Evie was actually developing feelings for, I looked the name up and I still can't say it, Yuriko? I don't know. So I really like that. I like that dynamic. And the way that she's just dropping him right now is so heartbreaking, and yeah, it's just really sad. And so I really don't know how I feel about the whole fake dating thing, and it's also quite open where this is going, because both of them seem to develop some feelings right now. So we'll see. I'm not the biggest fan of that development, but I also do enjoy that it's not like a clear-cut line, like when you have these kind of love triangles. And is it really a love triangle? I don't know. I don't like it when there's like a very clear line, like you can tell from the first couple of pages who the main character will end up with. So I do enjoy that this is done in a different way here, but still, this is not the way I want it to go. And then, as I said, we have focus on Henry and Ling, and I'm so worried about them. I do love this whole idea of this dream world. I love that they added in this nomadic train thing. It's so interesting. I had no idea that that existed at all. I had to look it up on Wikipedia. Because I wasn't sure if it was a real thing. But it's so interesting, and yeah, I think it's a very fascinating concept, and that's the part I definitely enjoy the most, and that's like the main storyline of the book as well. But I'm so worried about these two characters because I mean, it's a sleeping sickness and they're dreaming so much, so it definitely seems like something very horrible can happen to them at any point. And then we also get some warnings that they receive or that we see that something is definitely gonna happen. And we do have Henry who meets Louis in these dreams, and I do think that he is not real, that he is not the real person, but we'll see. And then Ling meets a girl who supposedly is on a ship that is crossing over to the US, and she is supposed to marry in the US. So we have this girl, and I also have some bad suspicions what her backstory might be. Because Ling can talk to the dead in dreams, and usually she realizes if the people are dead or not, but I still have a feeling that this girl is not alive and that she hasn't been for quite a while. So we'll see about that. I'm very intrigued to see where it goes. I definitely feel like there is parts that I care more about than others, but I feel very much entertained, and that's what I want from this book. So I will stop blabbering now and read the rest of this book. Here we are, and I finally finished Lair of Dreams, and we need to talk because I love this book. It was so good. I decided to give it 4.5 stars at the end. I just really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed it even more than the first book, which is great. I think that's mainly because it focused more on the characters that I cared about. Because honestly, Evie is fun and all, but I just like her better as I don't know, funny sidekick than a main character. I think that her whole backstory is very interesting, and we do explore a little bit more of that in this book as well. But I just love that we focus on Henry and Ling and just the themes that were brought up because of that. Now, there is a big warning for all the racism that is portrayed in this book. As with the first book, it deals with quite heavy themes, and the whole conclusion as well has to do with that. And I do appreciate the series for not glamorizing the 20s, but showing that it was actually quite a hard time. We have a lot of mentions of the war as well, because it impacted the lives of so many people during the 20s. And we always see it as this like super glamorous time where, yeah, there was just parties and parties all the time. But I think it is important to show that that was also just a coping mechanism because of the trauma that this new kind of war caused in the world. And I think this book does a very good job at showing that. At the same time, it was a time when racism and homophobia and violence against people was still very high and common, and that is portrayed in this book as well. So this is not the light fluffy read that I thought it would be, and as I said, I do appreciate it for that, but it is also very hard to read at some points. So if you want to pick the series up, I would definitely keep that in mind. This is especially prevalent in this book with Chinese people, with Asian people, and the homophobia aspect as well. But there's also other things portrayed in here, as I said, about the war, also sexism and the, just the role of women that was changing and how a lot of people could not deal with that in a healthy way. So yeah, I just really loved it. I think the ending was so good. It was so gripping. Like, I had to go to bed last night because I was so tired, and I was even a little bit afraid of falling asleep just because the ending was so intense and it's all about dreams. So sleeping did not seem like the safest option. But yeah, I really loved it. I think it's great, and I hope that the third book will be great as well. I've heard some mixed things about this series, that it goes downhill a little bit, but for now I'm optimistic because I liked this second book even more than the first one, and that's not quite what I expected. So I thought the first one would be the strongest, but I can safely say this one worked even better for me. Now I think I will go into a tiny amount of spoilers now, not too much because I don't want this video to be 2 hours long. But if you haven't read the book, please use the chapters to jump ahead to hear my thoughts on the third book. Oh, spoiler talk. Wow, everything that happened in this book. I remember talking about how Memphis wasn't really important for the book when I last updated you, and then the next chapter was when he started healing people again, and I was like, oh my god. Like, the tables have turned. And yeah, I did really like this like development and seeing his power. I think the way it is described is quite nice. It like always gave me like this, I don't know, this feeling. It's just, I could like really picture what it would look like, and I really enjoyed that. I also really enjoy the whole thing with his mum. So we have the crow, and we start to have an inkling of what the crow is about, why it is following him, and I really enjoyed that. Now obviously we continue to focus on Henry and Ling. We explore the dream world with them even more, and I had my suspicions, and my suspicions were correct. The girl in the dream, Wai Mei, I think I would say it. She was the woman causing it all, and I just really liked the way that this was all presented in the end. Like, it wasn't something where I felt like, oh, I knew that from the first page and lol. It was actually done in a way where it just felt very satisfying that it is the way I expected it to be. And I also think that the whole backstory was just so incredibly sad. And I think if this wouldn't have been written for a younger audience, this could have been explored even a little bit more. That's one thing that felt a bit short for me. Like, it was such a tragic backstory, and I think that we never really get the perspective of Wai Mei. It just took a little bit out of that. But yeah, I still really enjoyed that, and I think the way it was dealt with, the way that they finally stopped what was going on, was also well done. Now, what I could live without is the whole love triangle thing. I've said that before, and it is continuing, it seems. I do like this perspective of like, yeah, you can love more than one person at once. But I don't know, it just adds some drama to it that feels very 2010s to me that I don't really need in my books, but we'll see where that goes. I don't really have a favorite right now. I just really want to learn more about all the mysteries, and the whole like drama relationship bits aren't that important to me. Speaking of the mysteries, we have the scene with Evie and the comb, and I thought that scene was done so well again, because obviously we know that her brother is like so important to Evie, and she doesn't really know what happened to him. And I really hope that we will find out eventually, because yeah, there seems to be more to it. And the moment when we are in the memory with Evie and seeing her brother, it literally shattered my heart. It was so sad, like I almost started crying. I thought that was so well done, and just because we know Evie so well by then, and we have seen her ups and downs, and we know how much she's trying to hide behind her like very glittery facade, I think that hits it home even more because you're really feeling for her and you're really understanding where she's coming from. So yeah, I just really like that scene. I think that the way she dealt with it afterwards was a little bit eye-rolly because I do understand that this is a way to discuss the whole glitz and glamour, how that is a coping mechanism. But I also was hoping that Evie would have a little bit more character development and get out of that. And during this whole last scene, she felt a little bit like the comedic relief, basically, that she didn't really have the main character energy in that moment. And I think that is an interesting choice, and I'm intrigued to see with the third book who the like main characters will be, if it gets just distributed more equally through all of these like characters that we've gotten to know so well by now, or whether we will have new characters to focus on. Now, my favorite character still, I think, might be Theda. Like, I love Henry and Ling so much now. Like, I was so scared for them, and I think their backstories are so good. And yeah, just with Ling, I was hoping that the whole thing with George would be explored a little bit more. But she is a very rational person, and so we don't really delve into her feelings too much, I would say. But with Henry, obviously, it's also such a sad story. The moment he realized why Louis wasn't coming to the train station was so heartbreaking as well. And I was, again, almost crying. Like, this ending of the book definitely put me through all the feels. So, yeah. That was a lot. But yeah, Theda is such an interesting character to me, and obviously she's the only one by now who has kept her abilities a secret, but now Sam knows, and I'm intrigued to see where this is headed. Like, will this kind of trigger her to finally tell Memphis, because there has been some issues between them because she doesn't tell him what's going on. And then the ending where she gets the flower, oh my god, I'm so scared for her now. And I really hope that she will find the strength to talk to her friends and tell them what she can do and what she has done, so that they can help her and that she stays safe. Because yeah, her whole backstory is just so scary to me. And I don't know, I really fear for her. And as I said, I think she's still kind of my favorite character because I can relate to her on some level, and I fear for her a lot. And yeah, we'll see where that storyline goes. I also think that, yeah, just the ways that Sam reacted when he saw what Theda can do was so great. And he definitely had a lot of character development in this book as well, from being just this like charming, no good person in the first book to us really understanding where he's coming from and what he's trying to do and why he is the way he is. And I think he had a lot of moments to shine in this book. So I'm also intrigued to see where his character develops even further, because yeah, I think there's just a lot of potential, especially since we've learned in this last little bit of the book that his mom is actually alive. And so obviously I'm pretty sure they will find a way to find her. And I really hope for Sam that that will actually happen. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all of it covered for now. I think that it is quite well done with all the like mysteries and stuff. One thing I did not like was the way that it kind of faded to black when Will and Miss Walker came back. I wanted to know what they were talking about that evening. Like, why did we not get that scene? It was evil. But we'll probably learn more about that in the third book, which I've already downloaded, and I will start right away now, and I'll catch up with you when I'm halfway through. I'm fresh out of the bathtub and I just crossed the halfway point of Before the Devil Breaks You, so I thought I give you a very quick update. I definitely want to continue reading right now, so that's why I give you this, because I want to finish the series this year. I really want to try, so we'll see. But yeah, I'm now about 300 pages into the book, and as with the other ones, I feel like the beginning was a little bit slow, but after the first 100 pages, I really got into it. This also when I had time to actually read and not just read a page here or there, so that's also helping. I think that this one is not quite as focused as the first two books were, because with the first two books we had kind of the crime that was being investigated, if you want to call it that, and now in this one, the beginning, it isn't really clear what's going on, but we quite quickly learn that it has something to do with an asylum. And so this focuses more on this whole topic of reform of these facilities for people with mental illnesses who were treated like really badly in the 19th century, and now with these books we're obviously at the beginning of the 20th century where that started to change, but only very slowly, which is also something the book mentions. So yeah, this is a topic that is explored here. So we have a lot of talk about mental health also in regards to war and how a lot of the people who came back from the war had mental health problems and oftentimes ended up in these facilities who were often not reformed yet. So yeah, this is a really hard topic to read about, but then obviously it is mixed with supernatural stuff, and we have kind of this big fight going on in the series. But I do enjoy that it has a little bit more focus now. As I said, the first 100 pages or so, I wasn't quite sure where it was going, but now I feel like we know where we're going, what the deal is with this book. And what I was quite surprised is that the last book is called The King of Crows, but we actually meet him in this book, and I was quite surprised by that because I thought that would happen like much later in the series. So I'm intrigued to see where that goes. I'm not gonna say who he is or what he does, all spoiler free, but I was quite surprised that we actually have like a meeting of them now. With that, they have kind of a mission now. I do enjoy how the characters develop. We go back to Theda's story with this book as well, so I'm intrigued to see where that goes. And we also just see the rest play out. So we still have the love triangle bits with Evie. We do get more of a storyline for Mabel, even though I have to admit that this is what I'm least interested in right now. I think it is an interesting addition to everything and an interesting discussion, but it doesn't really fit in with the rest for now. So I'm intrigued to see whether that will play a role in the end, or whether it's just to have Mabel do something as well, because like she doesn't have any powers, so she's always like the third wheel kind of. And so yeah, I hope that is not just a storyline to give her something to do. But yeah, that one is kind of interesting, but also kind of not, because it doesn't really feed into the main storyline, and sometimes it's kind of distracting, especially in the beginning of the book. Yeah, it's just developing the characters further. We do get a lot more information on what's going on with the diviners, where they come from, and stuff like that. So there is a lot of back and forth between our diviners and Will and Miss Walker. So I don't know how I feel about that because whatever we learn, it is quite harsh on them, to be honest, but then they tried to turn things around, and I feel like our like teenage diviners don't really appreciate that part of the story. So I feel like there is a lot of conflict that is just because they're also teenagers and they just lack a little bit of grace, I guess. So we'll see how that develops, but it definitely is a wedge between them, I would say. And sometimes that can be a little bit frustrating. Now, we also have the storyline with the whole Jake Marlowe guy. So that one is interesting as well. We do see that there's definitely some going on. I'm intrigued to see what happens now, because one of our characters is now with Marlowe and they intend to be a spy, but maybe that won't work out. So that's also a bit worrying. But yeah, there's a lot going on. As I said, I'm trying to keep it spoiler free. And I'm very intrigued to see how focused the rest of the book will be, whether I will feel like it kind of wobbles around too much, or whether now it has like the main mission and now they're gonna do their thing. So I hope I can finish the book tomorrow and talk to you a little bit more. And yeah, fingers crossed. We don't have that many days of the year left. I need to hurry through this series. Okay, so here we are. Yesterday I finished Before the Devil Breaks You, and wow, what an explosive ending it was. I feel like the ending of this book makes you grow up very fast. Like, I think reading these books back to back is kind of a fun experience, because I feel like these series try to grow up with the readers and there was always quite a bit of time between the individual books. Now with this one, it did do a little bit of a Deathly Hallow, so there were quite a few character deaths that I did not see coming, but also it got a lot more sexual than I anticipated. Like, I always don't know how I feel about it when you have this moment when like pretty much everyone is having sex in some way, and it's like one chapter and then it moves on with the story. I don't know how I feel about these things. I always think they're kind of funny, but then again, you know, it's just natural. Like, at some point, most people have sex in their lives with themselves or others. So yeah, I thought that was kind of funny. But yeah, overall, this book was really, really good. Like, the last third was just so action-packed, and there is a lot going on, a lot that turned my stomach as well, because we're back with the theme of the eugenics, and there is some really horrible scenes with that. So yeah, this series definitely does a deep dive into that, into misogyny, racism, and it's just not fun to read, but that's kind of like the evil that is portrayed. So not the supernatural evil, but like the human evil of this series. So we have one character that turns out to be more and more of an antagonist, because he is wrapped up in all of this. And I thought it was interesting how that was brought into this book, and just the way we find out more and more about what happened and where the diviners come from and stuff like that. But just keep in mind that there's some really rough scenes in here with violence, with eugenics, just overall, the theme of abuse in a relationship is brought up quite a bit in here. And yeah, there's some definitely tough topics that are tackled in this book, but I felt like it is done in more or less a good way. I always think it's kind of risky to put this into more YA series, because yeah, as I said, this book feels so much more grown up than the first book. The first book felt like a true YA story, like all the creepy bits weren't like super scary, even though there were quite some gruesome scenes, but it was always kind of like fade to black with those. But now there is some really, yeah, just like rough things explored in this book. And I think in a way that is important, like also younger readers, like not like kids, but like, you know, older teenagers, they should be faced with some of these themes. They should know about some of the history, but just keep it in mind. This is not a light, fluffy read. just to make that clear. Again, I said that in the last update, mental health is also a topic in here, but I felt like in the second half we moved away from that a little bit again. Yeah, so that's the third book. I'm now scared for the fourth one because I've heard that it is a letdown, and so far I'm like really into this. I also want to read the last book in the next 3 days now, so I finished it still in 2022. But before I do that, I wanted to go into a couple of spoilers, and I would highly recommend, if you have not read this book and you want to do that someday, just skip over it because I'm gonna talk about character death and maybe you don't want to know who dies. So skip over the spoiler part using the chapters, and then I will tell you all about how I felt about the last book. Now, with this one, I was so surprised, like the ending was so crazy. We have a lot happening in the last couple of chapters of this book. Like we have Sam being abducted, which I did not see coming. We have Memphis and his brother fleeing, so they do not get abducted. I also am so intrigued to see how Bill is incorporated in that now, because he was more portrayed as an evil character in the previous books, but now that Memphis healed him, he is kind of redeeming himself, and I'm just intrigued to see where that goes, whether he will play an important role in the end of this book, because obviously his ability is very unique and very powerful. And I also think it's interesting to pair him with Memphis, because you could say that their abilities are kind of opposite to each other. We'll see about that. For now, they're fleeing together. And then we have the whole thing with Theda. Again, I said before that she's probably my favorite character. I just feel for her so much, and we learn so much about her in this book. We learn that she is actually mixed race, that her father was white and her mother was a Native American, and that her family was destroyed probably because of who she is, because she's a diviner. And that was just a lot to take in. I still don't know how I feel about it, and I'm intrigued to see whether this will be handled or whether this will be dealt with in the last book as well, like if she will get to know even more, because I just felt like that was just something you learn, but then it was like, well, okay, that's my backstory, kind of. So I would have thought that there happens a little bit more with that. Apart from that, we have her husband Roy showing up again, so that was very stressful for me, like reading about that. It's just such a horrible situation that I can't even imagine, and a lot of women are in a situation like that, so yeah, it was just very hard to read those bits and to see just men who are like that. It's just horrible. So that was a lot as well. And then we have the whole, like, I talked about the sex thing. So to start with the rougher note, we have this scene where the guy whose name I can't pronounce, Jericho, whatever, he gets the shot and then he turns kind of like animal and attacks Evie in a sexual way. That was also very scary for me, and I'm intrigued to see how the relationship of Evie and him is handled in the next book, because you can definitely see that there is a bit of a shift for her, but I didn't feel like it was enough. Like, if something like that happens to you and you're a girl, I feel like it impacts you more. Like, she's still talking about how she still has a pull to him in a physical way, and I could not understand that. Like, my mind does not do that. So yeah, I'm intrigued to see how they handle that. But then she gets with Sam, obviously, who's now abducted, and she and Theda decide to go after him and try to find him. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know how I felt about this whole triangle thing for the longest time now. Then what I thought was interesting is that Ling gets a romantic storyline as well with Alma, and I think it is quite nice to have also a female-female relationship in here, because we've already have some male relationships we see with Evie's brother James and Luther, and also with Henry, and obviously in the second book Louis, and now in this book he has a guy David. I don't quite remember the name because he doesn't show up too much, but we have quite a few relationships like that, so it is nice to see a female-female relationship as well. And we have some asexual, I guess, presentation. The word is not used, but the way that Ling describes feeling, it does read like asexual representation, so I thought that was interesting as well, but I can't really say whether this portrayal is accurate or anything like that, but I think it is great to see more incorporation of diversity in this book. Now, overall, there is a lot of diversity in this book, especially now that we learn a lot about these characters, like with Theda having a Native American mother, Memphis and his brother being black, and then Sam being from a Jewish mother. We have, and obviously Ling from a Chinese father, we have a lot of like diversity in that regard. And what I found interesting is that it actually makes sense. So there is a reason why this group is so diverse. And I think it's very interesting the way that it is like explained in this book. It again has something to do with the whole idea of eugenics, and I just enjoy the way that this is discussed. So yeah, just having all of this representation, all of this diversity is something I really enjoy about this series, and just seeing how all of these characters are so important for the whole plot is interesting. I have not talked about Mabel yet. We have the whole Mabel Arthur storyline, and I said before that I think it is kind of intriguing, but it didn't have anything to do with the plot for most of the book. Now at the end, obviously that changes dramatically, but I did not see it coming. I did not expect that they would die. And I was very surprised that Libba Bray went there. Now, obviously, that is the first shocking death, but we have more. We see that Will is killed, and we see, who else? Connor. Connor dies as well, it seems. So I was so surprised. Like I said, the ending kind of felt like Deathly Hallows. Like suddenly all of these characters die, and you were not prepared. So I think it's so interesting because it didn't feel like so high stakes. And then suddenly the stakes were so high. And I don't know, I would have wished that there would have been a little bit more build-up. Like, you feel like something bad is gonna happen, but not that it is gonna be so bad. But then on the other hand, that's what life is, I guess. And yeah, and I think Addie died as well. Like, she had a heart attack at the end of the book as well. So we have lost quite a few of the important characters. And I am intrigued to see how that will influence the last book now. But obviously it's also dangerous because there is just storylines that ended, basically, and that we will not get back. So we'll see how that goes. So yeah, this book was a lot. The ending was a lot. And I'm so intrigued to go into the last book now, but I'm also scared. So wish me luck, and I'll update you when I'm halfway through with it. So I'm halfway through King of Crows, and I thought I'd give you a quick update. I definitely see why people don't like this book so much. We do have the characters all split up again, which is always kind of sad when you have a story that like really focuses in on a group of characters and the way they are together. So when they then split up for a whole book, it's always weird and doesn't really feel that nice. So I can definitely see that that is something that people probably didn't love about this book. And then also we're leaving New York City, which also has added a lot to the book so far, because it has been set in that like 20s New York City vibe with all the like booze and the parties and stuff like that. So that's definitely missing. And so we have quite a different vibe for this book. I'm still enjoying it though. I think that the pairings are really quite interesting because it's not the characters that you would think would end up together, and some of these pairings are also a little bit explosive, to say the least. So, for example, we have Memphis and Bill together, which they have had their problems before, and they don't agree on a lot right now. And yeah, just some other character pairings that I think are interesting, like Ling and Jericho. As I said, I can definitely see why some people might not like the whole split up thing and the whole traveling aspect that we have going on right now. But on the other hand, I don't mind it for now. I think the way this is happening is interesting. So, for example, we have one group of characters traveling with a circus right now, which I just can't stop thinking about that one Bones episode where, Dr. Brennan and Booth are in a circus undercover. And that's kind of like what I picture in my head the whole time right now. So that's kind of fun and weird. But then we have another crew of characters who are traveling with a all-female black band, and that's quite interesting as well. And then our last group of characters is currently stranded somewhere. They can't really go anywhere, and so that's the one where I'm like the most disinterested in, I would say. Like, I don't know, they're just stuck there, like, I don't know, we'll see. I still have half a book to go, so there might still be a lot of things happening, and I just don't know where it will go. Like, there's a lot of possibilities right now, a lot of stuff is out in the open, our characters don't really know what they're doing, and in that regard, it reminds me a little bit of what I said about the beginning of the third book as well, where it just didn't feel like that focused. Right now, there is a clear quest, like there is a clear point where they are trying to go, but we have no idea whether the reason why they're going there is right. So yeah, it's definitely interesting, and I will keep reading. I will do some cleaning now, and then I will keep reading. So I can maybe finish it tomorrow. We'll see about that. That would still be like super optimistic because I'm only halfway through the book. And tomorrow at noon, my partner will be here. So I probably won't have all day to read. But just like fingers crossed, it would be so cool to finish this series before the year is over. So you will see it in a second. I will see it tomorrow night, I guess. And I will update you as soon as I finish the book. Well, it's been a while, but I managed to finish King of Crows before the year was over. Now, the thing is, I finished it on the 31st, and I don't remember much because that has been a week ago, and also I had a migraine right after it, so that's always really bad for my memory. But I tried to wrap this video up now, so yeah, I finished this series just in time for 2022, which made me very happy. And I did enjoy this last book quite a bit. Now, I told you I was worried about it, but for me, the ending worked. Yeah, I don't remember like all the details. I don't remember exactly when I did my last check-in. I hope I did one because everything is foggy in my mind. So yeah, this book I think is not as strong as the second and the third one, so I decided to give it 4 stars, but I think it is an adequate conclusion to this series. A lot of the stuff does get wrapped up in it, and we do see our characters evolve a little bit more, so I did enjoy that. We also have some more tragedies in this last book, so I was quite intrigued to see how the ending would be handled, whether these like horrible things would actually stay that way or whether there would be some kind of like magical solution to it. So that was something I was very interested to just see. And I think the way it was handled was okay. So I think you could have done like more extreme versions, like not solve anything at all, or just like bring everyone back basically. But it was kind of in the middle of the road, and I think I can respect it for that. So yeah, I did enjoy it. I would recommend this series. I had a lot of fun reading it. I think you definitely have to prepare for the eugenics themes, because those are just very hard to read, especially since this is something that nowadays we don't deal with that often anymore. But I think it is an interesting topic to explore in a historical setting where this was kind of an accepted way of thinking. So yeah, loved it. Fun series, definitely recommend. I don't know, I think I will go into quite a few spoilers, just a tiny part. So if you haven't read the book yet, then thank you so much for watching, and I hope that maybe you're in the mood now to pick this series up in 2023. And if you have read it, let's just discuss a very few things. Now, one thing that I thought was a little bit hindering my enjoyment of this book was the whole part about that girl. I don't remember her name, Sarah Beth. So she's somewhere like in, I don't even remember, somewhere where people usually don't go, Vermont, I have no idea. And that whole plot line, it was so obvious that it was a trap, and I was a little bit disappointed how long it all took. Now, I was very annoyed with the child, like Yesaya, because he had like his whole like identity crisis that the like big ones never listen to him and they ignore him and stuff like that. And it just all boils down to the fact that I do not like children. And so he was very annoying to me, and it was so obvious that he was set up with the whole thing. So yeah, it was definitely tragic, and I did not see his death coming. I must admit that. But the thing that actually really got to me was the whole ghost on the road thing. Like, that made me almost cry. And then the way Bill ended things with Sarah Beth also was so sad. I think Bill is such an interesting character in this whole series because we see him evolve so much, and we actually get his backstory quite early on. So it is always this kind of divide that you know how horrible he's been treated, but then at the same time you see him take advantage of Yesaya as a child, which obviously is not good either. So you always have this divide, and then when you feel like he's finally coming around, it was just so heartbreaking. It was so sad. So yeah, the whole, like, as I said, the whole like ghost on the road, I have goosebumps just thinking about that scene because yeah, it's freaky. And that's one of the things where I felt like it was just resolved a little bit too easily. I'm glad that Sita got that moment to stand up to her former husband, but I just felt like it was a little bit too easy. Like, I don't know, like, I think that was a bit of a big issue that was brought up and then not really dealt with in a way that would have been appropriate for it. As I said, it felt like a big distraction, and so I was a little bit annoyed how long it all took to take place because it was so easy to see beforehand. Then with the whole finale, I also felt like it was a little bit easy. I did not really understand the whole mechanics, like with like Sam telling Henry to dream something and then they have more time and they don't get destroyed by the machine. That all didn't make any sense to me. And then his mom, Sam's mom, just being like, yeah, I figured out a way. It was just like so out of nowhere. I felt like it was a bit too easy, and then they're in like this death world and whatever, and Yesaya is basically like, oh, I'm not gonna stay here, and so he comes back. So that whole part, even though it wrapped up the story, I felt like it could have been done better, especially since I felt like the second and the third book had such a good ending where a lot of things happened, but it made sense and things were revealed. And then this one just felt like a couple of chapters, everything kind of happens and it's done. So that's something that, yeah, was a little bit more frustrating, I guess. But I didn't mind so much just because I was sucked into this world so much, I guess, because of binge reading the series, that I was okay with the ending. And we get this little epilogue where they all meet again with the pastrami and it's all cute and such. So I was fine with the ending, and yeah, I think that's overall like the most important thoughts that I have right now. We do also have some like romances that pop up that I wasn't really sure how I felt about them. So we have the relationship of Ling and I think Elma, which I thought was interesting to be in there, but again, I felt like it wasn't explored enough. But maybe, yeah, I don't know. It just felt like it didn't have enough room. And then we have the girl that Jericho meets. And again, with this one, I felt like it was almost kind of like giving him some happiness before we can kill him off. And I did not enjoy that. I never do. I don't know, I just felt like the romantic bits in this book just didn't really hit home with me personally. Those are my thoughts. Let me know what you thought of the series. I would love to hear it. And I'm already very excited to read more series in 2023, so I will do more of these vlogs, but I will also do a wrap-up video of the 5 series that I read in 2022 someday later. So keep your eyes peeled for that one. And yeah, have a great day. I will talk to you soon. Bye!